Good morning, everyone. Haven't vlogged in a while since I think August with Veda, really. Not in any organized form, but yeah, some people have been bringing up a lot of issues lately that I thought would be interesting to my handful of viewers, and so I figured I would take some time to address some of those issues. I've also been riding my bike a lot, and I've actually been filming a lot of those rides. So I've been riding my bike 11 miles to work each way and to and from work. So it's like a 22-mile round trip every day. And we're on December 7th, so anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And it's the weather's getting a little colder. I would probably be riding now, but I was riding home in the dark and hit a patch of gravel and stuff. And I fell down. So I injured myself a little bit. Nothing that really left any cosmetic, problems. I fell on my shoulder and my arm. Actually, I have right under here. I don't know if you can see it, but this whole thing is feels like a big bruise, even though it doesn't really look like it. I bruised my ribs and stuff like that. So most of the time I feel about 90% right now. Occasionally I feel stabbing pains of being 20% of my normal capabilities. So I'm just going to give it a couple days, and I plan on riding, even if it's pretty cold, usually around, I'm riding an electric bike, and they recommend for the battery to, be used in temperatures over 0 degrees centigrade, aka freezing. So as long as it's above freezing, I'll probably be taking might be taking my bike to work still when it gets colder even, but probably just going to be doing it when it's mostly dry days and stuff like that. I'm not really, I enjoy it because instead of having to deal with a bunch of careless people piloting coffees instead of their cars on the freeway, I get to ride an 11-mile bike trail where you don't really see any cars and don't have really any negative interactions with people for the most part. I mean, I've had a couple of people over the course. I've been doing it since August, so I really kind of started. I stopped vlogging and then immediately went into biking my way to work, and yeah, it's been pretty solid. And I've only had a couple interactions with people who weren't totally friendly, even if the interaction didn't start out kind of every once in a while you'll get someone who's vocal in their opinions on something on the trail. Most notably my bike horn, which is I think it's 105 decibels. So I picked that because a lot of people on the bike trail, they have a rule on the trail that you have to sound an audible warning when you're passing people. So naturally a bike is going faster than a jogger or something. But a lot of the joggers and cyclists that are just out dawdling around on the trail, not commuting, not using it as a way to get somewhere in a reasonable frame of time, they put on headphones, and it just diminishes their situational awareness. So one of the things I like about having such a loud device, which I usually only give it 2 quick presses, so it's I've had people tell me that it sounds like a bird chirping, which is actually kind of a problem because I'm in big parks all the time, and I've had people who didn't hear me because they heard my horn. They just thought it was something from nature that's 105 decibels or something. If I heard that and thought it was a bird, I'd be looking all over the place. But whatever. So the thing I like about it is that most people, even if they're listening to their music or whatever, I can honk far enough back that they're like, huh, what was that? And then they're like, I'm going to look around, and they start looking around, and then they're like, oh, there's a cyclist. So you need to allow for that time lag. And most other people, they just either use their voice or a little bell, and then they like ring it, right? And so it's more like ding whiz, and then it's like, oh, I guess that was a cyclist. And so I'm trying to be courteous by giving people early warning, but because that's not what everyone else does, sometimes it causes confusion, which I think is interesting. The other interesting thing I've learned, and maybe you can provide some feedback on this, because I'd really love opinions of other people, is sometimes when I honk, it's kind of like the pitch of a bell. So I don't know, when I ding, it's a piezoelectric bike horn. So I don't know whether or not it's a horn. It says mega horn on it, but I don't know whether or not it's a horn or a bell. But it's really like electronically, it's a little oscillating piece of metal oscillated by an electrical pulse. You might have, pretty much any electrical device with a buzzer in it, like a smoke detector would have a device similar. I don't think mine's as loud as a smoke detector, maybe, and it's a little bit more like a bell pitch. But anyway, when I do this, as people are approaching, a lot of times they'll look over their right shoulder instead of their left shoulder, which, I'm passing on the left. So I would think, hey, I alert them that I'm passing, and they're off to the right side of the trail. So they would be like, oh, what's passing me? And they'd look that way. But they all seem to look over the shoulder. And one of the things I'm thinking is that maybe, like, here I am in a car, this is a perfect time to demonstrate it, is that maybe it's that when they're in a car, if they hear someone honking, then their instinct is to look over their right shoulder, maybe to like look out the rear window of the car. I don't know, that's my only guess. It just doesn't seem to make sense, because also if I make that noise and then I begin passing them on the left, then as they turn their head, I'm completely behind their skull. Like they can't possibly see me. So they'll hear this audible noise, they'll look over this way, and then they like won't see me because I'm starting to pass them. So it just, I'm not obviously stopping to chat with a lot of these people, but it doesn't make sense to me, and I'd really appreciate some explanation as why if someone alerts you to their presence from behind, you might look over your right shoulder when the only place where they could possibly be passing you is on the left. So anyway, but yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about is self-driving trucks. So through Columbus, Ohio, which is where I'm based, there's a U.S. highway called 33, and it goes right through Columbus, and it goes to on the south, it goes to Athens, Ohio, where there's some industry and stuff down there, but there's also Ohio University, and so it's known for being a party school, and people, sometimes they wear shirts and have jokes and stuff, get half your kicks on Route 33 as opposed to Route 66, obviously. So anyway, on the northern part of it that goes up toward Marysville, Ohio, which is where the Honda plant is, they are going to start testing self-driving trucks. And I know they're doing this in a bunch of other places. When I was in college and studying electrical engineering in 2007, a couple of my friends were part of a thing called the DARPA Grand Challenge. So this is the Defense Projects Agency for the United States. They have these technical challenges, and then they get college students and universities and their faculty, professors, to come together and try and solve really difficult problems. So the military has had trouble with people blowing up convoys. You might have seen some of this on YouTube. And they want to protect people and still get the supplies through. So the obvious solution is, make a truck that can just drive itself in military kind of conditions where you're not necessarily driving on roads, but then also driving on the roads and like not squishing the civilians and all this kind of stuff. So it's a tough problem, but driving a truck is kind of it's driving a vehicle is there's a set of finite rules for how to do it, and so it's something that you could automate. And so anyway, they did automate it back in 2007. You can go probably watch some documentaries on YouTube about the DARPA Grand Challenge and the various vehicles students came up with. I know Carnegie Mellon made some awesome self-driving cars that just blew everyone else out of the water. Like the first year, no one was able to do it, and the second year, Carnegie Mellon just made an incredible car that just could, it had no problem, and it just did everything perfectly. And then, so what they do is they make the challenge harder when that happens, and so they can innovate faster. So I like these challenges. It's a really cool way of seeing what's possible, and this is long before Google cars and Tesla and all this stuff. So we're actually starting to see some of this come to market in a very short span of time, and the same ideas. So anyway, I was talking with some friends of mine who are truckers, and their response to it was, well, what's the government going to do with all the people who are out of work? And I was kind of confused by that question, because I don't know if he got the bulletin, but it's not the government's job to find you a job if the job you're doing is so easy to do that a computer can be programmed to do it. Now, as computers improve, more and more jobs are going to fall into that category. But it's not the government's job, nor has it been in the past, the government's job to find work for people who are displaced by technology. And the way you get displaced by technology is you have a low-skill job that a computer can learn how to do or be taught to do. And then, a really good example people talk about all the time is welding robots and stuff. So welding robots didn't displace the best welders in the world for the best welds. Welding is still a highly sought after skill, and there's actually here at Ohio State University, we have one of the only welding engineering departments that's accredited in the hemisphere. Or at least we did a couple years ago. So for there's a huge market for highly trained welders and for artisanal welders. I mean, welders that you're like, hey, I need a weld on my Orion space capsule so my astronauts don't all die when it ruptures at the seam, and those people can make a weld that is oftentimes stronger than the original material. It's kind of like breaking a bone. They're using alloys and stuff, and they can tune it, and they understand chemistry. The chemistry of molten metal has always fascinated me, like the steel making industry and all that kind of stuff. It's at worst like cooking, and so an art, but at best it's a science like chemistry, where you get a bunch of scrap metal, you take a sample of it, and you're like, oh, it needs a dash of salt, throw a couple tons of sodium in there and get the characteristics you want out of the metal. So but what welding robots did is they replaced people for highly repetitive spot welds and welds that they don't care about being having that human intuition, that human touch, that human expertise on the fly. They might even do extremely high quality welds repetitively, where humans can, they might be spotty. If you really care about a super high quality weld, you might have a computer do it, like a kind of a CNC computer go and do your weld. But the other thing is there are a couple of industries that we used to have that I think all of you out there would prefer went away, even though it undoubtedly caused thousands, if not millions, of people to become unemployed. A really good example is if you watch the movie Frozen. At the beginning, they have these guys, and they're out on a lake chopping blocks of ice. And I don't know if any of the people watching realized what that was, why they were doing that, is because that's before they had refrigerators and air conditioners and mechanical refrigeration, it's called. You got refrigeration by having ice, and the way you'd get ice is when it's really cold, like up in Canada and stuff. You'd go and you'd have some guys go out on a lake and chop it up, and then you'd put it in warehouses, and you would keep it until the next winter. So you had to just keep it cold. Now, one way you can keep it cold is you can get 2 blocks of ice, you can put salt on one block of ice, and then that lowers the temperature, in the vicinity to actually below freezing. And this is how they make ice cream. So you've got ice, and then you put ice cream salt on, and that helps you freeze the dairy when just simply packing it in ice wouldn't be enough on its own. So anyway, these guys are chopping up blocks of ice, and then they'd go and put it in warehouses and transport it on sleighs and sleds, maybe on carriages, and then you get it to the warehouse, and then you need to get it to other markets. If you're in Florida, your ponds don't freeze enough over the winter for you to have even guys go out and cut up the ice. So you got to get it from places where it was already frozen. So you need to have it shipped in by heavy infrastructure like rail, where you can literally ship in thousands and thousands of tons of ice. And then a lot of that ice that you're shipping is only going to be used to make the ice that you actually want to use in an ice box or chop up and put in a glass of water or something. That's all got to be, so you need to ship the ice you want to actually use, but then you need to ship a bunch of ice that you're going to use to keep that ice cold until, August and September, and like when you start maybe being able to get shipments of fresh ice. Also, it sounds like it'd be kind of gross because, they just took it right off the top of the pond, so I'd imagine that they would have had, lily pads and little bits of plant and goose shit and all this stuff on in your ice when you were trying to get a drink of cool refreshing water. Whereas now with mechanical refrigeration, you might have some dust, or if you ever let a tray of ice cubes just sit for a long time until they sublimate, which is where they go straight from the solid state to a water vapor state. This happens if you just leave an ice tray in the freezer for 6 months or a couple months or whatever. You'll see all the ice cubes, they sublimate, they disappear, and it leaves only the precipitate. Another way to do it would be to just take a pan of water and just boil it down, boil it dry, and then add another pan and keep doing that repeatedly, and you'll start seeing there's this little particulate. It's could be salts or stuff that you see around your shower head, hard water, there are various chemicals and stuff, materials that are in our water, that are dissolved in the water, or they may just be particulate matter. Anyway, this is why some people drink bottled water, but I don't know. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger, right? So, anyway, there's a tremendous infrastructure for carrying ice around, and that infrastructure, when they invented the refrigerator, and then on top of so that we talked about getting it to your city, if you're in Florida or something, but then they had to get it to your house. They had all these guys in ice wagons, they called them, and they were horse and buggy, and they usually used really thick sawdust walls for insulation. And so you'd load a bunch of this ice into the ice buggy, and then this guy with this giant pair of tongs would bring it up to your house, and then you'd have to chop it up, or they'd bring you a size that would fit into your ice box, and then you could keep a couple things chilled, but you probably couldn't freeze anything. That's when the salt comes in and you start making ice cream. So if any of you have made ice cream too, that's a huge pain in the butt. And so what we did is someone invented mechanical refrigeration, and it started out on an industrial level. They started using it to refrigerate ice houses, and then they also started, and meat packing and other perishable industries. They started using it in railroad boxcars and stuff like that to ship produce long distances. And this is a time where the benefit to society there was that when you couldn't have strawberries from California this time of year in Ohio, all of a sudden you could. So it was the most awesome thing is you used to be stuck, I guess, eating potatoes and turnips all winter or something, and all of a sudden you could just get any kind of produce you wanted because you could just refrigerate it and ship it, and you could get stuff out of season much faster. Now, I'm sure they had some shipments of non-refrigerated stuff, but it spoils a little faster. So it's nicer to have it refrigerated in transit if you want it to still be fresh. So the other thing is, like, right now, like, if you want ice cream, you can go pretty much anywhere and buy ice cream. You can go to a convenience store 24/7. You can buy it ahead of time. You can keep it in your own freezer. Heck, you can even make it in your own house, um, using your freezer instead of hand cranking with like ice and salt and brine, and just it's a huge pain. So you can pretty much have ice cream anytime you want. So, like, when that was invented, people would go, like, I imagine some people said, well, what are we going to do with all the people who have an ice distribution network? What are we going to do about finding them jobs? And I mean, there may have been some government program, because this could have been right around the Great Depression that this changeover happened. But hopefully it wasn't really much of a concern of the government, because I think people were delighted with what this change got them. And people were also not, even if it happened, even if this switchover happened primarily during a time where there was a high jobless rate, if all you do is cut up blocks of ice and move them around, you can just move around some other material, or cut up some other material, or deliver some other material. And that really, when you think about it, that probably would have been a good time to start new industries branching off from others, focusing on these special delivery needs, something like UPS or something, which I don't know, maybe that's about when UPS started. I know it's been around for a long time. So what are we going to get from automating trucking? Well, first of all, like, one of the biggest reasons that your packages and stuff don't necessarily get to you as fast as they could is because truckers can only work certain days of the week. And, well, I mean, they could work more, and you can pay extra to have them work more, but generally, you're not gonna pay extra to have someone work on Sundays and the weekends and holidays and all this stuff. Computers don't care, so they'll deliver stuff 24/7, just whenever you need it. And that allows better planning of shipment schedules. That means less warehousing at factories. That means less expense. This is all passed along to the consumer. It means you're not having to pay benefits, and you're not having to pay injury claims for truckers and all this stuff. Now, there are some things that truckers might still be needed for, like when you get to your destination, you might, I'd imagine that the self-driving trucks will know how to back up to a loading dock, but periodically you need to shuffle trucks around in your lot. Maybe you only have 2 bays and you have like 16 trucks out in your lot, and you need to move some stock around. So there will still be truckers, but they'll primarily still just drive around on private property, or be doing short haul stuff where it just doesn't make sense to have this, where it makes sense to pay a human being to do it. There's also like less than truckload kind of stuff. There's shipments where there are very small trucks, and they might have a gate on the back that can go up and down. So you might like have a trucker who like delivers your new bed or your new appliance or something. So you might see a shift to that. So another thing too is that a lot of people, they're like, well, once self-driving trucks are invented, the industry will just go away. And it won't go away. It's, the high skilled people will shift into places where high skill is needed, like maybe transporting hazardous materials, or all kinds of stuff like that, where you need a better trucker, or maybe moving exceptionally fragile things, or there are a variety of needs I could foresee from that. You're also going to need people who just understand the logistics industry, and truckers really, they're where the rubber meets the road there. So they're going to be a good choice to hire just for general logistics position, which when you automate the trucking, which is time consuming and requires a lot of people, then you could actually have an explosion where there's actually more logistics happening, more trucking happening, because it costs so much less. If you think, Amazon's 2-day free shipping is good now, automated trucking could take that down to just, pretty much everywhere might have free shipping just as the cost of doing business. There are also some things people have often talked about: privatization of roads and some of the problems with tolls and stuff like that. And I've expressed that I thought a really good way to deal with that would be to have, there was a study done by the Department of Transportation, and they found that a fully loaded truck does as much damage to the highway infrastructure as 10,000 passenger cars. So it would make sense, if you're going to have the people pay for roads based on what they use, then you would have a passenger car driver like myself pay 1/10,000th of what a fully loaded semi truck carries and or pays for the road. And obviously that doesn't mean I'm not paying for the road at all. What it means is that it would shift how I pay for the road into the transportation costs on all of the products that I buy that are shipped via truck. And obviously, if I buy something that's primarily shipped by rail or by ship, or by air, then I would be paying the infrastructure costs associated with those industries as well. So that's interesting, because then a customer who's at the grocery store and sees 2 cans of tomatoes and they pick one based on price, what they would really be doing in that scenario is picking based on who provided the most efficient transportation of the tomatoes, as well as other factors. And so that way you get consumer-driven funding for infrastructure, which in a time when a lot of people are complaining about our crumbling infrastructure, which, I mean, the federal government literally has interstate highway bridges collapsing every couple years because they're not maintaining the infrastructure they have. These are all federal government bridges. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a privately owned bridge from one of the major railroads like CSX or Norfolk Southern or BNSF or something. They go out and they send out bridge inspectors all the time, and if the bridge has a problem, they just literally bring a bridge in on a train, lift out the old segments, put the new ones in. It takes a little while, but they try to have as little downtime as possible, and they just replace the bridges they need to replace. They don't wait for them to collapse under rush hour commuters and stuff like that, and then go, oh, I guess we need to replace the bridge. You also would have more stable funding. I mean, the Federal Highway Fund recently got a funding shot in the arm, but so the 2017, it's got some funding. But before that, it was unclear where the next, funding was going to come from. So that kind of makes it hard to do long-term projects. Whereas if you just have the customers who are paying for automated trucks driving on certain routes and then logging where they're going and then paying for the upkeep of the routes that they drive on all the time, then you're going to be able to a certain extent, predict how much traffic you think a certain route is going to get, and spend highway maintenance, construction, all that money. You're going to be able to spend it much more intelligently. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to need fewer lanes of highway and stuff like that, because automated vehicles are going to be able to make better use of the space. I mean, humans, we need to leave a lot of room between cars for reaction time, and when there's too high of volume and it doesn't leave enough room for good reaction time, then people freak out, they stomp on the brakes, you end up with traffic jams and heavy traffic and slowdowns and stuff like that. Automated vehicles, they only need a couple milliseconds. First of all, they can communicate all kinds of things more effectively. I mean, our way of communicating is we flash our lights, we honk our horns, we've got turn signals, we've got brake lights. Worst case scenario, we've got hand signals and screaming out the window at each other. That's not as efficient as a high-speed data stream to all the vehicles around you, so that the instant your car's microcontroller detects that you have a blown out tire on the left front and you need to pull over, a half second later, way less actually, every other car around you is taking evasive action. I mean, you could even have scenarios where a car has a blowout and currently the car's driver overcorrects, loses control and stuff. You could actually go, oh no, that car's got a newborn baby in it. It can't tolerate high G-forces. That car might wreck. All of a sudden have a couple other cars sidle up next to it and kind of box it in and cradle the car, even if it has a debilitating, destructive, let's say the axle fell off at 70 miles an hour. I mean, this could cause an accident otherwise. But you could actually have other cars come and swoop into the aid. The passengers in those cars might get bumped around a little bit, if there were passengers at all, could be a big semi or whatever, and kind of move and like nestle the car off to the road, off to the side of the road, and then have a whole bunch of other cars show up just spontaneously. Oh, there was an accident. Okay, check out all the people. Oh, they all seem to be okay. Okay, just get in these other cars and move on to your destination. Or, oh, this person's injured. Let's take them to the hospital. Or, well, now we've got a bunch of cars broken down by the side of the road. Send out an automated tow truck that just kind of scoops them up, puts them on the back, and drives off to get it serviced. And then when it's done, like, it doesn't matter. It's not an inconvenience that you're, the people repairing the cars, they only work a certain day of the week. Oh, Christmas is coming up, so it's going to be hard to get your car worked on. Don't worry about it. I mean, just put it in the backlog, and when the guys get around to fixing it and putting it back in the pool, they're going to get paid based on the efficacy of their repair, because all repairs are going to be logged against the fleet, and so they're going to be able to see which technicians' repairs lasted longest. So then obviously they're going to be able to favor certain technicians with scheduling, or maybe give those technicians more important repairs than someone whose repairs don't last as long. I mean, this is going to be just an amazing time when we've got all this figured out. And so then they get paid based on how fast the car gets put back into service. So, that's kind of an incentive for them to do a quality job and do it quickly. And they also aren't going to want to have a bunch of cars just sitting around on their lot. Plus, there might be car repair shops that are idle. They don't have enough customers, but they're just trying to get started in the industry. They can say, hey, automotive, self-driving vehicle pool, I've got capacity here. Send a couple vehicles my way. Give me a shot. I mean, it would be like Airbnb for maintenance on vehicles. And I've talked, the people talk about the Uberification of various industries. I mean, any industry where you have scheduling conflicts and capacity misunderstandings and stuff like that would benefit from being Uberized. And I think someday someone's going to invent an Uber for everything. And not only will it handle summoning self-driving cars. Oh, and we didn't even get to the talk. I had a really cool dream last night where it was kind of like Uber, but instead of a self-driving car, I was able to summon a self-driving drone. It was like a hexacopter or octocopter kind of thing, and it just kind of hovered down, and then I kind of got into like a kind of roller coaster, kind of, very simple but very, very good retention, very retentive. You just pull the bars down and click your seatbelt, and then it's like, okay, we're good to go. Where do you want to fly? And then it was like flying me around the neighborhood, and I was, it was an awesome dream to have. Hopefully you have dreams like that sometimes. But that's our future. It's like, this whole, like right now I'm sitting in a parking lot. All around me are a bunch of cars that are just sitting here rotting. The land can't be put to any better use, like agriculture or a business with buildings in it or a restaurant. I mean, it's just it's just a big, huge expanse of asphalt. And then if you come down here on weekends, it's just empty. It's bad for the environment. Where self-driving cars, I wouldn't have been sitting here for a little while chatting with you, but with self-driving cars, it would just drop me off at the front. I've got a, couple 1,000-foot walk into the office, because this is a really busy part of town. Well, maybe not a couple thousand, maybe a little under 1,000, but still, it's a bit of a walk. And I could just be dropped off right at the front door. And then the car would just go off and find someone else who needs a ride and take them for a ride. Now, this isn't, this is stuff that Tesla's talking about doing within 5 years. So, this is not, very distant future stuff. Uber's working toward it. The big problem with Uber is, their prices, when I've run the numbers, they're actually pretty competitive with owning your own car, as long as you eliminate paying the driver. When you take out, if you just look at the fleet management costs and stuff, to me, it would be totally worth it. Because keep in mind, if you don't have a car and you don't have any of the expenses like insurance, or you don't have maintenance expenses, you don't have to pay to have a garage, you don't have to pay to have any tools, you don't have to, there's all this stuff you don't have to pay for parking, all this money you get back. And so it's worth it to pay for a service like Uber, unless I mean, my car is pretty. I don't know if you can see the inside. You can't see the seats, but there's nothing here really. I mean, I could just carry a little backpack along with me or something and keep anything important in it. There's really nothing in my car. It's just I get in it and it's me. I could easily loan this out to someone and I'm not worried about them stealing my stuff. Now there are some hoarders, car hoarders and stuff, like you walk by, you know who they are. You walk by in the parking lot and like their windshields like stacked up with old phone books and stuff like that. So yeah, if you just lazily keep a ton of crap in your car for no reason, just in case you'll need it, then sorry, you're probably not going to be able to benefit from car sharing services. All you got to do really is just like fit it all into a crate that you can take with you, and then it's the same deal. But anyway, I'm really excited about the self-driving trucks. I realize that truckers are going to have to find something else to do. The person that I was, you really want, there are other jobs to do, and if engineers discover that your job is so trivial that a computer can do it, and do it better than you. I mean, that's the whole thing. These aren't going to replace truckers if they suck and wreck all the time. They're only going to replace truckers if they save companies a ton of money and they get things that are on schedule and they don't have accidents and they don't have health claims and they don't have pensions. I mean, these are what's going to make them replace truckers. So truckers are just going to need to look for other types of employment that, where computers haven't figured it out. And that's the history of humanity. There's actually a train going by right here. That reminds me of one more example. Is back in the old days, there used to be little shacks at railroad crossings, and the gates were like manual. So you'd like go out and like grab a lever and put the gate up and down. And then it was some guy's job to just sit there in the gate and just wait for a train to come and sit there in the shack. He had a little coal stove to keep him warm in the winter, and he would just sit there. And then when a train would come, he'd get a flag or a lantern and he'd walk out and he'd put all the gates down and he'd wave his flag and wave his lantern to tell people not to cross the street, not to cross the tracks. And then the train would go through and then he'd put all the gates up and he'd go back and sit down in his little box. And nowadays we have people who do that in parking lots, but even those tend to be getting automated. They have these like kiosks where you pay for parking and stuff. So, I mean, at some point, if all you do is sit in a box all day and use your lizard brain functions, the lower level, the instinctual stuff, which is how I think a lot of people drive. I mean, it's probably, I don't know a lot about the neuroscience behind it, but it's probably a lot of the same stuff of just walking around. It's like, don't bump into that. Oh, you're going too fast. Oh, you're going too slow. Maintain formation with other people. And it takes a little bit of effort to learn how to translate that through your arms and stuff into the controls of various vehicles like airplanes and stuff. But fundamentally, what allows people to drive is rather primitive brain function. And a lot of the stuff that took a little more experience, like navigation and stuff like that, it's really being handled quite well by computers. It's many people now use navigation apps on their phones to find the way to certain places, and they're even crowdsourcing that so it's faster to get corrections if the map is wrong, which is a case where you might need a human to step in. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts on automated trucks and the automation of the future and some of the great things, some of the reasons why, much like refrigeration, I like that I can have ice cream 24/7, 365 days a year. I like that I can have fruit from all over the world, and this is all due to refrigeration year-round, and I would never go back voluntarily to a world without refrigeration. And the benefits to all of society, especially, we didn't even talk about the medical benefits, but there are some medications that need to be refrigerated. So I would never want to go back to a world without refrigeration. And I think once people see a lot of the benefits of automating an industry as huge and that we depend on as much as trucking, and getting those benefits, in the long run, I think 20 years after it happened, I don't think you'll be able to find many people. I think you'll be able to find about as many people who would want to go back to humans driving trucks as you will who want to go back to cutting ice out of ponds and using it to hand crank ice cream anytime they want it. So anyway, that's it for me today. And as always, if you'd like, I'd prefer this to be more of a dialogue, so please ask questions in the comments. That's how this started, is just questions from friends and discussions with friends. I'm going to keep it going. I have a couple more ideas, so as long as I'm driving my car, I'm going to try and do this a little more often. It's harder to do on my bike. Maybe I'll consider it when it gets a little warmer, or I might find some way to do it that works. But please add comments with any questions of topics or criticisms. If you think I've got it all wrong, I'd love to hear why. And yeah, just like, subscribe, and if you ever talk about this issue with any friends of yours, if you know any people who like self-driving cars or future transportation stuff, please share the link with them. That's the greatest thing you could do to me. So anyway, I'm gonna go in and go to work and make some money, and I'll see you all soon.